Eventually, we will get one where it does not call Donnie the host of this show anymore. Rip Donnie. Okay, we are now live. Welcome to the show, everyone. We all knew it wasn't going to be quite so easy as Trump just signing a bunch of executive orders and everyone falling in line. After months of flailing around, his opposition has finally started an earnest pushback attempts, including district court judges who appear to believe that they are not just a check on the executive, but are actually in control of it. Also, we have yet another CR bill that doesn't seem to cut anything. Higher education and the Department of Education are feeling the pressure as reforms and cuts are made. And we ask the question, if Biden didn't actually direct or physically sign off on pardons, are they valid? We are going to talk about all of this and more in episode 488 of the In the Tank podcast.
That's as good as money, sir. Those are IOUs. Go ahead and add it up. Every cent's accounted for. Look, see this? That's a car. 275,000. Might want to hang on to that one.
All right. Thanks, guys. Okay, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. I am Linnea Lueken, and today, as usual, we have Jim Likely, Vice President of the Heartland Institute. Jim, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'd be doing better if I didn't screw up that intro and tell Andy to play that video, which was not what I thought it was, so it's my fault that we missed out on the awesome In the Tank theme song, so all blame goes to me. Other than that, doing great. It's a typical early spring or almost spring day in Northern Illinois. We were at 70 degrees 2 days ago, and now we have snow. So fun.
Yeah, I was about to say that means snow, right? Since it's spring in Chicago. I can remember many a white Easter growing up there. All right. We also have Chris Talgo, who is the editorial director at the Heartland Institute and Socialism Research Fellow. What's up, Chris?
Like Jim, I'm just trying to, make it through spring. Today is the first day of spring, and in Chicago, it definitely doesn't feel like it. But, I really hope we get a change soon here.
Absolutely. And we have Sam Karnick, Senior Fellow and Director of Publications for the Heartland Institute. Sam, how is it where you are?
It's actually a bit warmer than it has been in Chicago, but not much. So it's okay, though. Not bad. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Sam. All right. Before we get started, as always, if you want to support the show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. Please also click the thumbs up and to like this video. And remember that sharing it helps break through that YouTube suppression. Even just leaving a comment helps. If you're an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving a nice review. All right, so we are going to eventually get some kind of a stinger for this segment, but we are transitioning into our unhinged segment. And we're going to take a look at the recent outbreak of terroristic vandalism. So yeah, I said it, terroristic vandalism against Tesla, of all things. So Tesla dealerships and charging stations have been attacked across the country, and even in Montreal, weirdly enough, in protest of Elon Musk's Doge and the Trump administration. And if that wasn't bad enough, there was a website that was created doxing the addresses of people who own Teslas. And even worse, the Democrats are all cheering it on. So the Post-Millennial reports that the website's operators have stated that they will only remove Tesla owners' personal data if they provide evidence that they sold their vehicles. The website cheerily says that if you're on a hunt for a Tesla to unleash your artistic flair with a spray can, just step outside. No map needed. At DogeQuest, we believe in empowering creative expressions of protest you can execute from the comfort of your own home. Speaking of executing from the comfort of your own home, I'm worried that this is going to put not just Tesla owners in danger, but also the protesters themselves. It's going to be a FAFO moment if they take it too far. And this is terrorism, though, right, guys? I mean, textbook, basically.
That's the intent of it. And interestingly enough, remember that the left, the far left, but also much in the middle of the left, made a hero out of somebody who murdered a healthcare company's president. So they're moving in a certain direction. And to me, I think that it was good that you brought up the FAFO thought, because this is some big effing A, and they may FO big.
Are we able to pull some of the videos that we have? Because this thing from, I think, The Daily Show, was it? That we have a
Yep.
clip of? Just appalling. Take a look.
Jim, they're taking to the streets or the parking lots.
Tonight, the FBI and ATF now investigating multiple cases of possible arson targeting Teslas and Cybertrucks.
This dramatic video shows multiple cars in flames. Police say the attacker used Molotov cocktails. It's the latest in more than a dozen instances of arson and vandalism targeting Tesla.
The same suspect shot more Teslas with a gun. Tesla Cybertrucks were set on fire in Kansas City, and earlier this month, shots fired at a Tesla dealership in Oregon. Cybertrucks on fire in Seattle.
Wow, you guys like petty acts of domestic terrorism, huh?
Yeah.
Cool.
Someone's going to get killed. That's my prediction here before this all. And of course, the victim of the, the terrorism itself will be blamed when they defend themselves, as seems to be the left's go-to when it comes to their own domestic terrorism.
So I read the police blotter from my local town, Buffalo Grove, every week because it's just so much fun to do. And guess what came up in last week's blotter? A Buffalo Grove woman, I think she was like mid-30s or so, was caught spray painting the Tesla dealership on what is it? Dundee Road. Yep. So that's literally like 5 minutes, from where we're sitting right now in Arlington Heights. So yeah, this is, happening across the country. I think it's really sad, but I also think that this is so symbolic of the Trump derangement syndrome now being morphed into Elon derangement syndrome. So it's just so striking to me that a couple of years ago, like literally about 1 year ago, before Elon Musk had come out, as, pro-Trump and, Doge and all this stuff, he was a hero to these people. They literally worshipped him. And then all of a sudden, just because he says, you know what, I want to go and I want to help President Trump, actually address the crazy spending, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later. What happens? They completely flip on him. So, I mean, this is just like, I've talked a lot about this. Trump derangement syndrome just clouds all like viewing for people who suffer from it. And, this is just another aspect of it where they think, well, Elon Musk is so bad that anything we do is okay. And if that means blowing up or, a Cybertruck or whatever it is, doxing people and putting their lives in jeopardy, well, that's fine because Elon Musk is so bad. So this is just par for the course. And it's just really, really scary. And I think it's going to get worse, not better. But you know what? I've changed my mind on Elon Musk. A couple of years ago, I wasn't say I was anti-Elon Musk by any means, but I just thought, this guy kind of, he butters his bread through government subsidies and all this kind of stuff. I've changed my mind. I've changed my mind because Elon Musk, first of all, came here with nothing, came here and built some of the best companies America's ever seen. And we should, be proud of that. And we should, champion that. And this idea that Elon Musk is now, the worst man in America is just, it's crazy to me. Look what he just did, this week. He rescued those astronauts that were stuck at the space station without, his Starlink satellites, without SpaceX, without Tesla. The United States would not be as prosperous and as great a country as it currently is. So I think we should applaud Elon Musk, and anyone who, stoops to this level. This just shows how desperate they are and how just warped that their ideology has become.
I recall during and I'm sure Sam does too, and Chris and you too, Linnea, and all of our viewers and listeners, recall that during the Biden administration, our then Attorney General Merrick Garland would give frequent press conferences talking about how the greatest domestic threat to domestic peace and tranquility, our greatest danger was supposed white Christian nationalist terrorism. Right. And so that was the gravest threat to the United States. Now, the number of incidents carried out by that supposed group of people in the United States, I believe, is zero or very close to it. Yet here we have this is really just an extension of what has been going on with the Antifa left since 2020. And it's the real gravest domestic threat of terrorism in this country is entirely leftist terroristic threat. And this is just another example of it. It would be hilarious if this wasn't so dangerous. That 6 months ago, it was mandatory to own an electric vehicle, and Tesla was the best electric vehicle to buy. Now, the left that would demand that be the case for our society are now setting them all on fire where they can. And it's really funny that Elon Musk is supposedly a Yahtzee, but it is the left, these leftist terrorists who are out there burning Teslas at their dealerships or in people's driveways. They're keying them with their with their keys, and they're keying swastikas into them. They're spray painting swastikas on Tesla dealerships across the country. And so, as with everything, it's that it seems to happen with Democrats or the left. It's all projection all the way down, and this is yet another case of it. And you are right, Linnea. This is increasingly dangerous, and somebody is going to get killed. It was somebody whipped up with leftist hysteria who assassinated a CEO on the streets of New York. And what is he now experiencing in jail? He has marriage proposals and love letters, and people are defending him on T-shirts. Free Luigi, they say. This is, and people seem to forget that there were 2 attempts on Donald Trump's life in the campaign. And if not for turning his head, not even that much, like I just did on the screen, his brains would have been blown out on live television in front of millions of people. And why is that? Because the left and the media and the Democratic Party, and this is going to tie into what we're going to be talking about stuff later on, called him, a grave threat to our democracy. That democracy is over if he is elected. He's a Yahtzee. He's a fascist. He's all of these things. And what ends up happening are 2 people make an attempt on his life. And now the same kind of rhetoric is ginned up, false, dangerous, and violence inciting. Is happening now against Elon Musk. And I, like Chris, I'm not really an Elon Musk fanboy. Never really was. But I have to admire what he is doing for his country. He doesn't need to do any of this. He doesn't need to do this at all. He cares about the future of America, and he knows that if we do not slay the federal Leviathan that has done nothing but grow for decades and decades, for our entire lives, since the beginning of the 20th century, it has grown and grown and grown, and now it is going to consume our prosperity. It's already, in a lot of ways, consumed our freedom and our liberty. It's consumed the Constitution, and it would consume all of our money. We will go bankrupt. And he doesn't need to do any of this. And look at all he is putting at risk to try to get this under control. And his thanks for that is for the left to lie about him, lie about Doge and its purpose, lie about him taking away everyone's Social Security and their Medicaid, their Medicare. And then now it's turning into violence against his companies, and soon against himself. He was on Joe Rogan last week, I believe. And he has very good security, and he can certainly afford it. But he knows, and he's right when he says that he is putting his very life at risk for this project to save America, to do something that has been talked about for decades and never been done. And that is getting the federal budget and the federal Leviathan, that is a money stealing and a freedom stealing entity in our life, under control, if not slayed entirely. So I admire him for that. And I again, our media is so corrupt. Has a single Democrat been asked to condemn the violence that's on the streets right now against Teslas and against Tesla owners and all that stuff? Is one?
Well,
no. But every
no.
Republican walking the halls of Congress had to answer for January 6th every time they ran into a reporter. So, once again, I'm glad you guys are watching and listening to this podcast, because the mainstream media is dead and they're liars. And now you can actually have intelligent and discussion about what's really going on in this country instead of the fake news that we've been, saddled with for all of our lives.
I gotta add 2 more things. Yeah, I agree with everything that Jim just said. So the Vancouver Auto Show, I think it's this weekend, and they just told Tesla, you cannot participate in this. I think that's going to be probably repeated And I think that that's really, really dangerous because they said, "Oh, it's a safety thing, so we don't want you at the Vancouver Auto Show because that would jeopardize the safety of the participants." Hey, Vancouver Auto Show, why don't you just make sure that no crazy left wing, lunatics go there and do anything to the Tesla display? How about that? Okay. Another thing that I saw is Tim Walz, the joke governor from Minnesota,
Yeah.
is on a comedy. He's trying to be a stand-up comedian here. And the other day he was talking about how he has on his phone this thing that shows him how much Tesla stock is falling, and how he was saying it's down to 225. This is so great. Ha ha ha. And then someone said, well, Mr. Governor, you are aware that your state has millions and millions and millions invested in Tesla for your pension. So you're rooting against one of the biggest companies in your state's pension fund. But of course, he's too stupid to realize that. So that just goes to show how insane all of this is.
Yeah. That's why, audience, we have called this segment Unhinged. And this is probably one of the most widespread versions of that. It's kind of been building for a long time. Remember how cute Occupy Wall Street was compared to this stuff? Remember
Yeah.
how cute Occupy Wall Street was compared to like the BLM riots and all of the recent left wing stuff? I mean, this stuff has just been building and building.
Well,
It's
remember the Tea Party, how the Tea Party riots were supposedly these super racist, violent, demonstrations, when actually they weren't at all. And the only side that engages in violence, and once again, not to be so partisan, but this is just the truth of the situation that we find ourselves in. Almost all the violence is coming from the left. And that is just an indisputable fact. Okay. So they need to stop with the violent rhetoric, because as Jim said, you could draw a line probably between that and what happened, over the summer to President Trump. And, to me, it's just, it's scary, because what is this going to result in 3-4 years down the road? I mean, it's just, I wish that they would cut down the rhetoric, and those fans cheering that at the Daily Show audience. The same thing happened on Jimmy Kimmel, and it's just it's deplorable.
The left is not an organized movement; it's a herd, and they get scared into any particular direction. So there are leaders, but they don't make a plan and develop that plan and then send everybody off to follow that plan.
Sam, I kind of disagree. This is not a grassroots, resistance. This is a highly centralized. I've heard the usual suspects are involved. George Soros. If you watched that demonstration or riot, whatever you want to call it, at the Trump Tower in New York City last week, they all had matching shirts on. Just like all the brand new tents from REI, at the colleges, last spring and summer. So this is not these just grassroots people being like, oh, I'm so annoyed. This is as usual, a coordinated, centralized astroturfing, which is also, part and parcel of the left. The Tea Party movement, generally speaking, was actually, Americans just saying, "Yay, we think this is wrong." And they went and they protested peacefully. The left, whether it's Occupy Wall Street, whether it's these crazy campus protests, or whether it's these crazy, Tesla, fire bombings, tends to be a coordinated thing.
Well, Chris, you're actually just stating my point in a different way. What happens is that the left creates these monsters, and then the people are frightened into attacking the monsters. And the whole point of this is that you don't actually have to have an organized plan. All you have to do is scare people, and they will run off in that direction and start flailing around. And that's exactly what's happening with Musk. It was what happened with Trump. Now it's happening with Musk. Maybe 2 months from now, it'll be someone else. But the point is that what this process is straightforward anarcho-tyranny. And this is, it is definitely led from by a small group of people. But what they do is they just inspire madness of crowds, And that is the real danger, because the opposition, meaning us, can't predict what kind of mad things are going to happen. And then we're left to react. And when you're playing defense, you're losing.
Well, I'm gonna cut us off there because we could talk about this for the entire show, but this is actually just the short segment to start off the show with something entertaining. But this has become half of the show today, so we're gonna move along here into topic number 1, which is the CR that we just got from Congress. So there is a wide range of opinions on this one on our side of the aisle. On one end, we have people like Thomas Massey, who insist that Trump and the Republicans have once again betrayed the mission of Doge and perpetuated the same old scam that our government has been pushing forever. Democrats were crying about how somehow, despite no cuts being made, domestic programs were going to run out of money. We weren't going to have money for Social Security. We weren't going to have money for all sorts of stuff. And proponents say that we needed to pass the CR just one more time to avoid government shutdown. Where have we heard that before? All right, from Town Hall, we have, if passed, it will freeze spending and eliminate waste, ensuring that Trump's America First agenda moves forward. It will also fund mass deportations of illegal immigrants and secure the southern border. In addition, the CR will help root out corrupt deep state spending. The only thing it won't do is make Democrats happy. But that doesn't seem to be quite the whole picture. Sorry to make you jump around, Andy, but our allies over at the Competitive Enterprise Institute write, the real crisis isn't these recurring shutdown standoffs. It's Congress's refusal, or more aptly, its inability to impose even the slightest discipline on a federal behemoth that has grown far beyond anything the framers would recognize. Even so-called discretionary spending, separate from entitlements like Social Security and care, have become, with deficits inexcusably allowed to linger at COVID era true $2 trillion heights, and the national debt swelling to $36 trillion. One frustration for libertarians is that GOP rhetoric often makes it harder to make the case for cutting agencies and programs when the can that gets kicked down the road is finally picked up. So, Sam, I'm divided here. I pretty much lean towards the Massey camp on this one, based on what I've read so far, if only because we've heard a million times that we'll cut spending next time, a million times next time. But I know that there is some debate here on this, even within our circle of friends. So what's your take on it?
Well, thank you. Let me start by saying that I'm to the right of Thomas Massey and Rand Paul on this issue. I believe that federal spending immediately should be reduced to at least the 2019 level, immediately. I also believe that the full solution to this, and it is necessary and must happen, is to limit federal government spending and regulation, all of it, to the enumerated powers, the powers enumerated for the federal government in the Constitution. That would knock spending way down to a minimal government. That would also, frankly, get rid of Social Security and other items which are unconstitutional. So Massey and Paul do stand for cuts, and they do stand for a better form of the federal government, but they're stopping well short of where I am. So in that light, I actually think that what's going on here is, in fact, the Trump administration and Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, are moving in the right direction. I think they know exactly what they're doing. If not, then I'm smarter than they are, which can't be true.
But Sam, this is just a continuing resolution to keep the budget funded for a couple of months while they work on the reconciliation bill, in which the big spending cuts will be made. The reason why they had to do this was because if they didn't, the federal government would shut down, and they needed to get it passed by the House and by the Senate. And Chuck Schumer did come on board and support this because it needed the 60 votes in the Senate. Reconciliation only needs 50. So that's what this is about. This is just about keeping it open for a couple more months. They actually did cut some of the spending from the previous CR in this, which is why Hakeem Jeffries was, apoplectic about it. But this is not the big, budget.
Big beautiful bill.
Right, exactly. That has already been passed by the House, and it's being worked through in the Senate as we speak right now. And that is where these big spending cuts are going to come through, along with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act provisions that would expire at the end of this year. So to me, making a big deal about this is not a battle is not a hill I'm gonna die on. This is just to keep the government functioning for a couple of more months. Democrats actually were, outraged by this. So the fact that they are so mad at Chuck Schumer for him even supporting this right now, and I've been watching some interviews, and Chuck Schumer is just getting, pilloried by Pelosi, by AOC, by Bernie, and by Chris Hayes, and all the people on CNN and MSNBC, because this actually is a small spending cut, but it's just going to pave the way for the giant reconciliation bill that is going to go through pretty soon, within probably about a month or so, that is going to actually implement giant systemic cuts to federal spending. So I think it's just not really worth it to jump on Trump and Congress for this one.
That's correct, Chris. And that's my point. That's exactly my point, which is that this continuing resolution had one purpose alone, and that was to make sure that that we did not have a massive tax increase at the end of 2025. That's all it was for. And that's what all the manipulation of the spending that's in that bill was about. It was just to make it revenue neutral, which I don't believe in. I don't think we should have that rule. But it was just to make it revenue neutral so we could get this bill. Because what this bill was intended to do, the continuing resolution, is to keep the 2017 tax cuts in place, so that because we would have an absolute economic catastrophe if those tax cuts were ended at the end of this year. And I believe that is in fact what has been driving all the uncertainty and the kind of disturbances in the stock markets and other areas of the economy.
I can guarantee you that budget reconciliation bill is going to go through, and that it's going to include no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. And I've been watching Kudlow and a bunch of Fox Business shows almost every day, just because I'm very interested in what's going on in this on a very like molecular level. And what they're also talking about is that this will now include tax cuts for people like in my income bracket, which is awesome. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, they want you to think that it was all about millionaires and billionaires getting these giant tax breaks, but that is 100% not the case. I just finished the text for an update of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act effects on income taxes that we'll be publishing very soon, and it shows that from 2017 to 2018 and from 2018 to 2019, the middle class got the largest percentage of that tax cut. So, I've been saying this for a very long time. The only way that we're going to get out of this giant hole that we've dug ourselves into is a big pro-growth economic agenda. Donald Trump, with his, deregulation, with his energy dominance, he just announced yesterday that he's going to, increase coal production. Yesterday, I watched. I'm sorry, guys, if I'm, babbling here, but Chris
no, you're
Wright,
good. This is good.
Chris Wright was on Britt Baer on the Fox Report on Fox News yesterday, and he did like a 25-minute interview, and I was just on the edge of my seat watching it. And Chris Wright said that Donald Trump held oil and gas executives at the White House yesterday, and it was the first time they've been in the White House in the past 4 years, and they are saying, finally, thank you so much that we can now reinvest in oil and gas production and in resurrecting coal plants, because that forms the foundation of our economy, especially with the technologies that are coming down the pike, AI, quantum computing, all these data centers. So I mean, I'm trying to think about this from a very macro perspective, And I think that, what's happening right now is we are deregulating, which is very, very important. We are going to cut spending, which is very, very important. We are going to keep cutting taxes, which is, I think, the supply side nirvana here. And I think that is going to result in an economic boom that we haven't seen in a very long time. Barack Obama told us 2% growth is the new normal. That doesn't have to be. We can get back to 6% growth. And I think that this is going to hopefully result in at least 3 or 4%. But man, I think it would just be so awesome if we had 5-6% growth, because that would increase the living standards of all Americans, especially those of us who are in that, that middle income bracket. I mean, that would really, really change our lives. So that's why I'm not going to sit here and bash the GOP for this CR. This was a necessary thing in order to get the big budget reconciliation bill through, and that is what this is all about.
Well, that's exactly right, Chris. This reconciliation bill was intended just to make sure that we do not have an economic crash very soon. Because if they could not pass an extension of those tax cuts, that would be a monstrous tax increase. And as you said, it would even affect people like you and me. So what happens there is that this was needed in order to prevent a catastrophe, because if that catastrophe came, there was no way that the Republicans would be able to pass a big, beautiful bill that includes everything. And here's my thinking, is the intent on the part of Trump and Johnson in particular is to create this big, beautiful bill that will have everything in it, including things about a subject that we will probably get into shortly, the judiciary, limiting the judiciary, some of the things that they're doing. So we'll talk about that later. But the big, beautiful bill, I think, is intended to include all of that. And it is going to, and it will be something that would be impossible for any Republican to vote against, because they'll burn their cars.
Yeah. Okay. So we have this question from Bogus that I wanted to bring up, because it was something that I was thinking about while you guys were talking. Thomas Massey always has maintained, and I believe Paul has also maintained, that we should be having like 12 different line items going out. So instead of just one big bill with everything crammed together. That way, Donald Trump, when it gets to his desk, can say yes, no to things down the line. So that's Bo's question here. He says, is there any chance that the House will put out individual budgets for each department, or will it be another omnibus?
But the president can't. The president doesn't have a line item veto. So
but Chris, what this person is suggesting, as far as I can tell, is that if you put it in
regular order in the appropriations process,
if you put it in multiple bills, he could just get
that's what I meant.
Not sign the funding for education departments.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, yeah, but we all know that Congress hasn't instituted regular order in decades, and they're completely incapable of doing that. Of course, I wish that there was a funding bill for the the Department of Education and this and that and the other thing. They could say, oh, we want to eliminate this, we want to eliminate that. But unfortunately, with the way that Congress functions right now, or doesn't function, I think is better. The reconciliation is the only way you can get anything through. Remember, Obamacare, that was through reconciliation. The only way to get substantial legislation through in this new era of partisanship is reconciliation. So you get one go of it, which is really crazy when you think about it, because when a new president comes in, you think, well, he's got 4 years to do all this. No, he doesn't. He really has one, because all they care about is the midterms, first of all. So they're freaking out about the midterms, but really it boils down to they get one shot at reconciliation. Reconciliation is important because the Senate cannot they cannot do the 60 vote rule there. It's majority. So they cannot filibuster it. So that's why reconciliation it's very wonky, but I think it's extremely important to understand that as long as the reconciliation bill goes through with the increased tax cuts and the cuts in government spending, we will be so much better off of this. So I'm not going to worry about this the details of this CR actually.
I agree. Regular order is not appropriate in a time when things aren't regular. Right now, things are in a truly catastrophic situation. The situation that the Biden administration left us is absolutely disastrous. And the funny thing is, for those who love big government, this will bring it down. This would bring down the government. Right. You know what happened in February? Did you all hear about this? Did you look at the numbers? Because what happened was the federal government borrowed more money in February than it took in taxes. Now, this goes to my point that the federal government can only take in a certain amount of money in taxes, and that's all there is to it. And all the fancy things that you want to do, you're going to raise the rates, you're going to raise the number of things that you tax and so forth. It doesn't work. You only get a certain amount of the output of the American people, and a certain percentage of the output of the American people. So you can forget that. So what do? They borrow. Well, in the present case, this borrowing is simply what was left to the Trump administration by the previous administration. It's an absolutely forced situation. But think about that. We're now borrowing more than we're taking in taxes. That's obviously not viable. It would lead to a disaster. And the funny thing is, again, if you're more radical than Thomas Massey and Rand Paul, as I am, you can say, well, if we actually get that disaster, fine. Federal government shrinks. No problem there.
Okay, thank you, everybody. That was a good segment. Okay, we are going to move along here. We're going to talk about higher ed and the Department of Education on the chopping block. Okay, so from the Wall Street Journal, starting with the issue going on with Columbia right now. So Columbia is nearing agreement to give Trump what he wants. The Trump administration has extended Columbia's deadline until Friday to agree to 9 far-reaching demands. The government earlier this month canceled the grants and contracts over allegations of anti-Semitism on New York City campus, but gave the university a review period. The demands include banning masks, empowering campus police, and putting the school's Department of Middle East, South Asian, and African Studies under academic receivership, which means it would no longer be controlled by the faculty. So some have said that this is a massive overreach, violating the First Amendment and academic freedom. Others have argued that federal funding is a privilege and not a right, and Columbia gets $400 million in federal funds. For the next part of this, talking about the Department of Education, I'm going to pitch it to Chris. But Sam, you're the one who brought this up in the chat yesterday. So I would like to get your opinion on this particular issue first.
Thanks. 400 million is actually not all that they get. They get a lot more than that. And so this is ridiculous, frankly. A place that has a $50 billion in the bank, whatever it is, their endowment is enormous. Places like Columbia, Harvard, Yale, Princeton have these enormous endowments, and they could live off those endowments very, very comfortably. They don't want to spend that money because basically what these places are their hedge funds with some students and a lot of radical administrators. So they're not institutions of higher education in any way. They're a complete scam. The only way to fix this really is to have no federal government money going there. Where is that in the Constitution? Show me that particular enumerated power. It's not there. You can say it's for the general welfare, but man, giving me a few $1 million, that would be for the general welfare too. So I say. So the problem here is very simple. We give too much money to these people, and what happens is we destroy market discipline, meaning that when you give a lot of people a lot of money, they do what you tell them, the person who's paying the piper, instead of doing what the public wants. And inevitably, the public is much smarter than these awful progressive leaders. And so we put ourselves in the situation where we've destroyed market discipline all across the entire nation. All of our institutions have been corrupted in this way. Even our culture has been corrupted this way. So all of this has happened because the government always wants to increase its power, and so they're paying the piper, and they're the ones who are paying, and so they get to decide. Well, now Trump is the one who's paying. And on our behalf. And so Trump is saying, well, now I get to decide. Well, they don't like that because the system was built so that it would run on its own without some jerk president making decisions. Well, sorry, folks.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that is, kind of pricking people's ears is this idea of the academic receivership in the Middle East department. It seems like, the government stepping them on, what they should teach and how they should teach it. Jim, but I mean, if you're taking the government's money, isn't that kind of like part of it? I imagine. I mean, for a long time, we've been between Title IX and all sorts of other, legal precedents. It seems like the government has already had their fingers in these schools. Or, is this genuinely some kind of an overstep?
Well, this is actually a great example of why the federal government should not have any role in the education policy of the United States to begin with. The people on the right, conservatives, did not like it when Joe Biden leveraged the money that flows from the Federal Department of Education to force every school in the country to embrace trans ideology, and you will not get a cent for school lunches or for whatever the money is spent for unless you allow biological males to compete and crush their female counterparts in women's sports. And so it was used as a cudgel to advance radical leftist ideology in every public school in this country because school boards were basically they had a gun to their heads for that. And now here we have a case where somebody that the left doesn't like, Donald Trump, is using the Department of Education and federal funding as a cudgel to force what he thinks schools should do. Now, whether you think it's a good idea or not that schools should not force their students to mask up or allow demonstrations, which is allowed in free speech, to turn into violent anti-Semitic riots on your campus. Whether you want the federal government involved in that or not is an open question. But I know Sam and Chris would agree with me. It's better just to not even have a Department of Education so that the federal government, which swings wildly these days, it seems, has such outsized and inappropriate and unconstitutional influence on the education system in this country from K through 12 to college campuses. So if those lefties screaming that the Department of Education might be eliminated entirely, we'll actually find out that it is a good thing overall, not only because the Department of Education has, since its inception, has not done anything to improve test scores and to increase the knowledge and education and made our kids smarter. They're actually dumber now than they were in the 60s and 1970s. So eliminating the Department of Education, that's something that even Ronald Reagan talked about doing and never got around to it. Taking it back to the continuing resolution, the reason Chuck Schumer went along with it, and now he's being pilloried for it on The View of all places, and had to cancel some book tour events not because of anti-Semitic violence, but because his book is about Israel, but because his own leftist base was going to protest him at his own book events. Why? Because he thought if the government actually shuts down, we may not be able to turn it on again. And if we shut the government down, Donald Trump will just decide, okay, well, when we start up the government, the Department of Education is not going to be in that startup again. They're gone. They're done, right? And so that's why he got scared into agreeing to the continuing resolution. And what's going to happen anyway? I certainly hope and pray, and I know Chris and Sam do too, that the Department of Education will be X'd out at some point in this year. And and believe me, everyone, kids will still be able to go to school. They'll still be able to eat. It's just that the administrative state, which has grown exponentially, even though school attendance has remained flat or in some places gone down, may be defunded, and that is a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. So, Jim, you've completely stolen my announcement of the next section here, which is, in this. Okay. So, part 2 of this topic is the Department of Education. Yeah.
Yeah, can I just comment real quick on the higher ed stuff? Because I think this is really important. So Columbia University was, I think, ground zero for these insane anti-Jewish, anti-Israel protests. Khalid Muhammad, who now is in Louisiana, and hopefully he will get thrown out of our country very soon because he is a green card holder and it's a privilege to be here. It's not a right, in my opinion. Was really behind a lot of the just, heinous anti-Semitic protests, riots, whatever violent confrontations, whatever you want to call it, that engulfed Columbia University in New York City. And it is just insane that anyone would defend Columbia University, this terrorist wannabe with Hamas ties. I am so glad that Columbia University is being put in the spotlight. They've already fired their president. A couple other of these Ivy League, presidents have resigned or been fired as well. I think this is long overdue. I am just ecstatic that Donald Trump is playing hardball with these universities who, like Sam said, they've got billions of dollars in their endowments. And, they are not in the business of educating young people for the future. They are in the business of indoctrinating them to be anti-America and anti-Israel. That is just preposterous. This must stop. This must stop now. Columbia University, they actually took over a building and held 2 janitors hostage. No one was actually held accountable for that. How is that possible? How is that possible? It's just it just blows my mind. Anti-Semitism is definitely raging in this country right now, as we've seen, and it blows my mind that here we are in 2025, 80 years after World War II, and that is still happening. It makes me sick to my stomach.
You're right, Chris. How is it possible, though? Kathy Hochul, Joe Biden. That's how it's possible. There's no consequences.
So, yeah, I really don't have very much to add there. I mean, this is, people can have their opinions on, the influence that Israel should or shouldn't have in our federal government. They can have opinions on Israel's behavior with regards to, how they respond to terrorism from Gaza, from Hamas. But it doesn't mean necessarily that we have to put up with all of that crap on our college campuses. All right. So, with regards to what Jim said about getting rid of the Department of Education entirely, we have this from the Washington Times. President Trump is venturing into territory no other Republican president has dared to go. He is closing the cabinet department his predecessors were afraid to touch despite their rhetoric. The president selected Linda McMahon, I don't know how to pronounce her name, I'm sorry, to lead the team to wind down the sprawling bureaucracy. Few government agencies have failed as spectacularly in the 46 years since their creation. Despite plummeting student performance, Congress allocated $82 billion this year. Uncle Sam collects this sum from each state's taxpayers, and after skimming a few billion off the top, he redistributes the remainder to the states. The education department is a middleman that only makes things worse. Okay, now, Chris, is this finally going to happen? Is the government going to close the Department of Education?
Well, Trump actually just announced this morning in an executive order that he was going to do this. But as far as I've, read and seen everything, it would require Congress, approval here, because Congress did, green light the Department of Education. I think we should go back and realize that the Department of Education was a giveaway to the teachers' unions. You can go back and you can read the history, but Jimmy Carter, rest in peace, Jimmy Carter. When he was running for president in 79 and 80, he basically made a corrupt bargain with the teachers union, saying, hey, if you support me, I will, make this Department of Education, a federal department. And look what's happened. 40 something years later, we spend more money than any other country in education. Our test scores are plummeting. Our nation's report card just came out. 28% of 8th graders can read. I think the math is like 31%. I mean, it's just atrocious. I've been in public education for many years. I was a teacher here in Illinois and in South Carolina. And I can just tell you that it is a joke. It is a joke. The Department of Education is just so corrupt. It's all about money. I think I've said this many, many times, but every single year, the first week was so important because you get these federal, these blue sheets, and you would have to write down how many students you had attendance wise for that first week. And then they would average it out, and they were just maniacal about make sure we go and knock on doors and get these kids for that first week, because that then will determine the amount of funding that you're going to get for the entire year. And it always just dawned on me, but it's like, but what about after week 1? Oh, it doesn't matter. It's like, we just want to get them in for that 1 week so that we can fill out our blue cards and we can get as much money from the feds as possible. So that just goes to show it's all about money. It's sick.
Yeah, it's the same
Of course,
thing with
it's
those,
for
like,
the kids.
Yeah.
right. And it's the same thing with those in Illinois, those Prairie State exams that we had to take in, I think it was 8th grade or 9th grade. Your teachers like totally coach you on how to pass the exams just so that, your school has super high scores, and then you can, get funding based on your scores. It's totally corrupt. I keep hearing, I actually, one of the best things I ever saw from NPR was a long podcast that they did covering this trend that the Department of Education helps to enforce, which is getting rid of phonics in schools. They decided that kids didn't actually need to learn how to sound out words based on the the sounds that combined letters make, but rather you just had to have like an association with the general kind of shape of the word, and that's how you learn how to read. And it turns out that that's totally wrong for the vast majority of people.
In the school that I taught at, which was Bluffton High School, I think you probably are well aware of that, Linnea. It's, in your neck of the woods. We had English teachers who would tell me that their kids, and these were high school kids, seniors, juniors, and sophomores for the most part, who couldn't read. And she said that for many years they've been doing this guess, this thing of, you just try to guess the word. You don't try to sound it out. You don't try to actually learn the definition of the word. You just try to guess it. There were so many times when we would do class readings and it would be a pretty simple document. I was not having them read anything that was, way above their grade level. It was brutal. It was so, I would have to help them, coach them for just the most simple words. And it's just like, wow, it's really, really bad. It's not just the reading, it's the math, it's the science. I just wrote about STEM education and how we are falling so far behind China and other countries in terms of STEM education. And that's really going to drive the future. If we do not have an educated population here for, the next, generation who can, take this artificial intelligence and quantum computing and do all this stuff, we're going to fall behind. We are already falling behind. So, to me, the Department of Education has made things worse. It will be better off without them. I would love to see that money just get block granted to the states and let the states do what they do, which is become the laboratories of democracy. And what works in South Carolina might not work in Montana, and what works in Florida might not work in Texas. So this whole notion that we should have this one size fits all education system is ludicrous in my mind. And I've just I've been there. I've seen it. And, the argument of for No Child Left Behind and all these, these big programs was, well, what if someone from Arkansas moves to Arizona? They want to make sure that they're on the same grade path. Yeah, that's true. Of course, that's true. But you should have it at the state level. The states should develop the curriculum. They should develop the standards. And there should be compacts and that kind of a thing. It should not be done from Washington, D.C. in this giant one size fits all, which is always doomed to fail.
Yeah, it's like I teach Sunday school now, and I'm always astounded at the level of intelligence and the reading acumen of homeschool kids compared to the public school or even some of the private school kids. And you can always tell which ones were taught phonics and which ones were not taught phonics, because the kids who are not taught phonics will take a wild guess out of thin air at what a word is, and it has nothing to do with the context or anything. And you're like, where did you get that from? That's not even close to what the word is. But
you're a great teacher. I would never say that. But
no, I didn't say that. I would never say that. But guiding them through it. From there, but in your head you're like, man, someone's really failed you down the line here. But true. The idea that the public school and even a lot of the private school systems have this planned out curriculum that works for everybody is demonstrably not the case. And I think that that's one of the things that COVID really revealed more than anything else. All of these parents sitting at home watching their kids actually like in their class or working on their homework or their classwork while at home. There's all sorts of stories out there about parents who realize like, oh, my kids actually can't read. I thought they could because I assumed that they were being taught to, which, you know, it's the parents' job too. You shouldn't be entirely depending on the school anyway. But, you know, all these parents were like, wow, they actually don't know how to do math. They actually don't know how to read. I was just assuming that they did because I've been sending them to school for all these years. Now what's going on? So it's one of those hidden benefits actually of COVID. There are a lot of, I don't think we'd be here talking about getting rid of the Department of Education if COVID hadn't happened, actually.
No, of course not. Parents didn't know these things about what their children were being taught, not because the parents are neglectful.
Mhm.
It's because the schools deliberately held back this information from the parents, and they have obfuscated everything. And they have made the test such that a child who is illiterate is categorized as literate. So this is what the parents, you're saying, oh, it takes two for a lie to happen. It takes someone to lie and someone to be lied to. Well, it's not your fault if you're lied to repeatedly and you don't know what the truth is.
Exactly. Well, speaking of not reading things and also probably not writing either, are Autopen pardons valid? From the Heritage Foundation's Oversight Project. The Oversight Project is conducting an ongoing review of public documents discharging non-delegable presidential powers containing former President Joseph R. Biden's signature. In this memorandum, we conclude that individuals in the Biden administration other than the president appear to have used a device called an Autopen to affix the president's signature onto some of the most controversial clemency warrants of his presidency. Our conclusion is based on an analysis of suspicious documentation. For example, we uncovered 2 identical Autopen signatures that were affixed to multiple acts of clemency. Multiple acts of clemency. So the question here is, of course, was Biden aware of this stuff? And if he wasn't, or if he wasn't capable of being aware of this stuff, what does that mean for the orders during his presidency? Jim?
I don't think it means they'll be thrown out.
Yeah.
I have a hard time believing that if this were to make it all the way to the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court would decree that all those acts of clemency and all the other things that he signed with an Autopen are invalid. But it is nice that we're actually having a conversation about this, because Joe Biden set a record and blew away all of his contemporary presidential peers with more than 4,000 signed pardons or clemency for convicted federal felons. I think second place might have even been Donald Trump with only 1,500 of them. My understanding is that the use of the Autopen started in the Obama administration, and it was used sparingly, as it probably should be. But because it's used for things. The president signs a lot of proclamations and things. A lot of it is just ceremonial. They don't really mean anything. I think Obama was the first one to sign a significant piece of legislation using the Autopen, but the rule was that you had to be in town and you had to have given affirmative assent for its use. And usually it's because it needed to be signed right then. There's a mitigating circumstance, right? But of course, what a shock that the Biden administration and actually the people running the Biden presidency, which I think is clearly not Joe Biden, abused the use of the Autopen. I think there needs to be a serious investigation. It should be in Congress, because Congress is supposed to be a check on the executive. And for once, it'd be great to have a congressional investigation that actually was meaningful and didn't just have people yelling and then it gets nowhere. That there could be legislation perhaps passed, either banning the Autopen or strictly outlining its use, and then the Supreme Court could weigh in. This is something that we should be having a conversation on, because the idea that Joe Biden himself personally reviewed all of those acts of clemency, or even had a conversation with somebody else we had reviewed them, who assured him that these people are worthy of clemency or a pardon, And then, that is just not feasible. The man was barely able to walk down a hallway, was barely able to stay awake. He would just clock out, in the middle of the afternoon and not be seen again, back up into the residence. My understanding actually is that he spent 90% of his time in the last several months of his presidency in the residency and not in his office doing what he's supposed to be doing. So, should those things even be valid? I mean, like I said, I don't think it's going to be possible to, as Trump said, just consider them null and void. All those pardons of the January 6th Commission and all of his other people, murderers and stuff that Biden pardoned, that those are now invalid because it was signed with an Autopen. I don't think that flies, but I think it's time to actually figure out what went on. I think the American people are owed an explanation for that because it's outrageous.
I just have one question on this topic, and this is for Jim. Jim, who do you think was more incapacitated in the last year of their term, Woodrow Wilson or Joe Biden? And that is a serious question.
It's a serious question. Didn't Woodrow Wilson suffer a stroke?
That is correct.
Okay, I still say Joe Biden.
Me too. I agree with you. Okay, that's all I got to say on this.
Okay, I don't think we have. Yeah.
Oh, real quick point. We don't need an auto pen. Look, if a president has a stroke and he can't sign bills, either they're all pocket vetoed and nothing happens. That's good. Federal government doesn't do more things. Or you 25th Amendment the guy or gal and get him out of there. It's real simple. You don't need an auto pen and you shouldn't have one. It's stupid.
All right. Thank you very much. Terrific, guys. All right. So we have a new problem. And we all knew that this was coming eventually once the left stopped just flailing around panicking about all of Trump's orders. We've got district court judges who are seemingly a little bit confused about the role of the judiciary. So from the center square, White House doubles down on Trump's call to impeach judge. Despite pushback from the nation's top Supreme Court justice, the White House continues to stand by President Donald Trump's demand that federal Judge James Boasberg, who attempted to block recent deportation flights, will be impeached. He drew Trump's ire after ruling Saturday that the deportation flights carrying 261 foreign prison gang members in the U.S. illegally to an El Salvadoran prison must return to the U.S. But since the planes had already entered international airspace before the order was issued in the courtroom, the Trump administration did not comply. The president then took to social media calling for the judge to be impeached, which earned him a rare rebuke from U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts, who said Trump's reaction was not an appropriate response to disagreeing with a judicial ruling. White House Secretary Carolyn Leavitt told reporters Wednesday that while Trump maintains great respect for Roberts, the president has not backed down. All right, so we also have another report from the Center Square saying that 26 attorneys general have filed a brief in support of those deportations and saying that it is the president's job actually to take actions like this, and the Constitution allows for it. So they are rebuking that district court judge. Likewise, other district judges are tackling other orders made by Trump, including another judge in D.C. who took issue with Trump's ban of transgender people from military service. And hilariously, she cited Hamilton in her opinion. That is Hamilton the musical, not the historical figure. Jim helpfully pointed out the reason why this happened to me on X. So, Jim, I want you to give the audience your thoughts in your own words here.
Oh, or the citation of Hamilton in her decision? Yeah. It's because where she cited the excerpt or the preamble of the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. Well, a LGBTQ activist federal judge certainly cannot be caught writing the words all men are created equal, so she had to use all people. And people is not anywhere else except for in the play Hamilton. So her ideology is what backed her into it a very, very silly corner. Yeah.
So, guys, we have all of these different, we all knew that this was coming. We all knew that the lawfare, or that not even necessarily lawfare, but that every single one of Trump's major orders were going to be challenged in the courts. So what are our thoughts on where this is going to go?
Well, first, I just want to point out that the judge who wanted those flights returned back to the United States, his daughter is actually big in the immigration business. So little conflict of interest there, of course. So I mean, first I'm going to defer to Mark Levin on this. I watch Mark Levin's show on Fox News because he is the great one. He is 10,000 times smarter than I'll ever be on all this kind of stuff. And he just makes a very simple, yet I think extremely profound point. The president of the United States has enumerated powers according to the Constitution. The Constitution does not even address district judges. They were created by law by Congress, decades after the Constitution was signed. So how does a district judge usurp the power of a president? And he's basing it off of nothing other than, well, I don't think that this should happen. That's not how it works. As Jim said earlier, I think first of all they have to have standing. Second of all, they are supposed to be, in the proper jurisdiction. This is not happening in most of these cases. This is the usual forum shopping. So they go to their, activist judges. That one, of course, was an Obama appointee. The other one, I think, was a Biden appointee. So these are activist judges who have, an axe to grind with the Trump administration, and they are putting out these incredibly, wide-ranging injunctions that are stopping, the president from performing his executive duties. That is just insane on its face. Another thing that I saw was the amount of injunctions that have been issued during President Trump's first term, in the first couple months of his second term, far outweighs all the other injunctions that were issued during all the other presidents' terms. So that makes no sense. Okay. So I think, we saw lawfare, being used against Donald Trump. Now that we're seeing judge-fare being used against Donald Trump, and it's pathetic. And I really hope that the Supreme Court, does what they're supposed to do, and they come in and say, wait a second, Mr. District Judge, you are going way out of your bounds here. Stay in your lane. Do not try to impede the actions of a president when he is performing his constitutional duties. To me, it's as simple as that.
Yeah. I mean, it really is, it becomes a little bit confusing when, they say, well, we have to have judiciary doing this kind of thing because it's part of the checks and balances. But then you think, well, then if they wanted to, every single order from every single president could be stopped like this and hung up in the courts forever and ever. And then it's like, that's not really a checks and balance. That's the judiciary is in charge of the executive.
Yeah. Here's an example, actually, going back to our last topic. Autopen signatures for the clemencies and pardons. Why couldn't a conservative judge just issue a decree saying that those presidential actions are invalid because I say so? Now, somebody, getting back to this issue, though, but somebody's abusing their power here. It's either these judges or it's the President of the United States. And only one of them has their powers clearly outlined in the Constitution. And spoiler alert, it's not some leftist judge, in the resistance and colluding with the same kind of people who funded the BLM and Antifa riots and now the assaults on Teslas across the country, and the shock troops of the left out in the streets, because this is all part of the same thing. Not only the judge who said literally. Reminded me of that scene in Trading Places when the Don Amici and the other guy were like, "Turn the machines back on!" Right when they got swindled, it's like, "Turn the plane around," he says. That judge was also one of the J6 hanging judges. It is amazing to me, and Chris alluded to it, how every single one of these cases, these challenges to Trump, end up just randomly, right, with the same kind of leftist activist judges that were jailing people for parading on Capitol Hill and not doing any violence at all. So, get me started on that. But look, I'd love to hear Sam's take on this as well. Chris, listening to Mark Levin on this is always very smart. The president has enumerated powers in the Constitution. This is one of them, is directing the executive policy. Executive policy is directed by the president, who is directly elected through the Electoral College, but is the people's representative in the White House in the executive branch. If a judge doesn't like the outcome of the election, he does not have standing, and any judge who has any honor at all would throw these cases out, would not even hear them, because he would know that this is a dangerous precedent to set. The left doesn't seem to really care about dangerous precedents. They never think these rules will ever be turned around against them. Like I said, What is to stop a conservative judge from throwing out all those pardons, or just putting a stop on them, or whatever? Some low-level district court judge would have no standing to do that. Yet these leftist judges think that are also in lowly level, and as Chris pointed out, are not even mentioned in the Constitution, other than the fact that Congress may establish federal courts as necessary to run the country and to run the judicial system, can stop these things. Now, you may not like what Donald Trump decides to do with the executive branch and through executive policy, but that's too bad. Your chance to stop that was in November. This idea that federal, and this is all part of a strategy, big time part of a strategy, and a well-funded strategy at that, because all these things are connected. It is to just stop, by hook or by crook, every single thing Donald Trump is attempting to accomplish as president, using his rightfully enumerated powers in the Constitution. The Supreme Court, shame on Justice John Roberts for not moving in on this and basically bringing his rogue underlings in the federal judicial system to heel, because this cannot continue. I think there are now 5 injunctions stopping executive power that was unquestioned before Donald Trump became president again. He can't even stop the grift at EPA. Yet another January 6th hanging.
How dare you?
Yeah. Another January 6th judge stopped, so there was, the EPA, $20 billion, gold bars thrown off the Titanic. Lee Zeldin gets nominated and approved as EPA administrator, and he decides, I'm going to put a hold on that stuff. A judge just last week or a couple days ago said, no, you can't put a hold on that. That money's going to be spent. That's 5, like I said, 5 injunctions on what was uncontroversial presidential power until Donald Trump is president. This cannot continue. The Supreme Court better weigh in here and fast, or this is really going to get out of control. And we don't want our politics litigated on the streets, as they say. We want them litigated in courts, but really in the Constitution.
Jim, you brought up a very interesting point. You talk about how conservative judges don't do this. Here's why conservative judges don't do this, at least in my opinion, because they have fidelity to the Constitution. These activist judges don't. They view the Constitution as this, living document that they can change, at a moment's notice. When we look back at the Obama years and the Biden years, they both did things that really, really pushed the limits of executive power. I mean, I think back to, Joe Biden just declaring that college debt can just be, erased. A lot of conservative judges could have done something about it. But you know what? They said, that is not our place. That is not our place to do that. And I feel that these crazy activist judges from the left are put in there purposefully to try to delay agenda of any conservative president or any sort of Congress that wants to impart limited government and put some checks on the federal Leviathan. So they are not doing their job. Their job is to interpret the law based on the Constitution or based on the law itself. They're not doing that. They're saying, here's the outcome we want, and we are just going to try to make it seem as if there's law or anything on our side to get the outcome that we want. It's backwards.
This is indeed represented by Trump and John Roberts. The problem here is very interesting. You notice that Article 3, of the Constitution, which creates the Supreme Court, has the same wording as Article 2, which creates the office of president. The executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So what you have there is that the executive is clearly given total authority over that branch, and the Supreme Court is clearly given total authority over that branch. So the Supreme Court cannot just, or a district court, much less, cannot just go in there and say, well, you have to spend this money. You have to do this. You have to do that. You have to turn a plane around. You have to make the oceans rise, not rise, whatever it is. They don't have the authority to do those things. They do it anyway because they get away with it. And it's because presidents have allowed them to get away with it. So what's happened here is Roberts has said that, look, please don't do that. It's our job to restrain the district courts. And of course, the answer to that is, well, you haven't done your job. You're going about it awful damn slow, and we need something done here. And in the particular case with the terrorists who were sent down to El Salvador, Boasberg really pushed the government, pushed the Trump administration to go there, which is this, that Boasberg kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And finally, Bondi said, hey, wait a minute. No, you don't have any right to do this. And that is where we're at now. So if Roberts and the court would step in and say, look, a district court does not have the right to decide these issues. It's got to come to us directly. They have the right to do that. They haven't done it. And that's on Roberts. And that's on the rest of those judges, except for the blessed Alito and Thomas. And Kavanaugh's pretty good sometimes. And Gorsuch too. But that's their problem. They did that. They're the ones who have allowed this to happen. Now, what's going on in this present situation is that the Trump administration is trying to get things done. The court is saying no, lower courts are saying, no, you can't do that. Remember our first topic? More spending from Congress, and what's the big, beautiful bill going to have in it? One of the things the big, beautiful bill could have in it is a provision stating that district courts cannot rule on cases at the presidential level, that they cannot rule on what the executive can and can't do. And that would be constitutional, and it would be statute, and it would be law, and the Supreme Court would just have to deal with it. So it's interesting what Trump keeps doing. He keeps saving the country from themselves. He keeps saving the government from itself. So his attempts to get spending down are a way of rescuing the government from total collapse. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at total collapse by around 2032, certainly by 2034, probably by 2030, I think. So we're looking at total collapse if things go in the direction they've been going. And the same goes with the judiciary. If they don't get their act together, nobody's going to listen to them. They're going to be done. The government won't have any money. So who cares what they say? It doesn't make any darn difference. And Trump is actually rescuing the judiciary from a stupid and lazy and cowardly U.S. Supreme Court. That's what's going on here. If you're a very intent on small government, you might say, gee, Trump, just let him go. Let him blow this up. But of course, that would create absolutely horrific conditions in this country. Trump is trying to rescue the system that stands and reform it. I would love to see the big, beautiful bill address this. If it does, I don't see how any Republican can vote against it. So the bill passes, and that's what you need to do.
Yeah, I've heard for a long time from a lot of people on the right in particular that their fear, if the things that we've been talking about today continue the way that they have been going, is that we are hurtling towards, at best, balkanization. And that is probably not ideal. Although some people, more on the accelerationist side, seem to think that that is the only way to get out of this. But Trump is definitely fighting as best as he can, it seems, to try and prevent that situation. Do we have anything else that we want to add here, guys? We went way over today because we had a lot to say about the previous topics. Chris?
Yeah. I'll just end this on a good note, because you just talked about balkanization, and we constantly hear this, that the United States is more divided than ever, and that we are so bifurcated on these issues. I agree that there is a division right now. As a student of history, I think that we've been much more divided in terms of the Civil War era and some other, times in our history. But I think that this is being falsely perpetuated by the media and social media, I think in particular. And when you look at stuff like the right direction, wrong direction, for the first time since 2000, we have cracked the 40% of the country thinks we're on the right track. That is humongous. Like that is a huge, accomplishment. But a lot of these issues that we're talking about here, whether it's the spending stuff, whether it's the border stuff, whether it's, the lawfare stuff, these are 80-20 issues. 80% of the country generally agrees. If you take all the politics out of it, you take all the personalities out of it, the Elon Musk stuff, and you just say, hey, should the government cut this waste, fraud, and abuse? 80% of people say, yeah, of course they should. Should the government, patrol the border? Of course, 80% or so. So I think that what we're doing is we're seeing the Trump administration focus on these 80-20 issues, and their political capital is actually increasing. I'm not saying that a bunch of Democrats now are on the Trump, bandwagon by any means. But what I'm saying is that a lot of the independents and a lot of the people that might not be so, vocal, they actually agree with this. And I just, and then this is anecdotal, but just in my little orbit of people whom I interact with, I always just, kind of just get their feel and their thoughts on things. And I'd say for the past couple of months, it's like, yeah, this is really good. Really, really glad that this is happening kind of thing. And, for the past 4 years, it was like, just not feeling so good about the country kind of thing. So I think they might not come flat out and be like, yeah, I'm totally MAGA or, I'm totally like pro Trump and all that. But they're saying, you know what, generally speaking, he's putting us on the right track. And that to me is great. And I said this last week, and I mean this with every ounce of, my being. I've been watching this stuff now for 25, almost 30 years. I've never lived in a time like right now, where we're talking about cutting government, where we're talking about, just doing these massive reforms, getting rid of the Department of Education. I got to pinch myself literally almost every single day, because it is just so unbelievable. So let's, understand that there are going to be, certain roadblocks along the way. There's going to be hiccups. The path is not going to be perfect, but we're moving in the right direction. And I just want to just emphasize that, we're finally getting some of this spending under control. There's finally talk about getting this entitlement spending under control, stopping the foreign wars, just all this stuff. So that I just, we talk a lot about the bad stuff, and that is totally true. But I think there's also a lot of good stuff going on. And I think that this is a great time to be an American. I'm very proud. And I'm looking so forward to when these policies really start taking shape. And, maybe a year or so from now, when we're just looking back and saying, man, this is great. I strongly believe that's going to happen. I especially believe that's going to happen on the economic front.
Awesome.
Quite true.
Well,
people want the benefits of of MAGA, but they want the social status of declaring themselves in opposition to it.
yeah, I think that's probably true. I think that's what you get from a lot of the, one of our bigger hurdles right now are a bunch of Republicans who have been talking about cutting departments and cutting spending for decades and decades. And now that it's actually happening, they're like, no, wait, actually stop. And those guys, our job is to just ignore them and keep moving forward. Okay, fellas, that is all the time that we have, unfortunately. I would love to keep talking about this forever, but thanks everyone for tuning in. Remember that we are live every single week on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. For audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using and leave a review. Thank you so much to all of our usual panelists. Jim, what do you have to pitch at us this week?
You can follow me on X at JLakely. Follow the Heartland Institute on X at Heartland Inst. And always visit heartland.org.
Chris?
Yeah, just visit heartland.org. We've just got so many great things coming out real soon. Jack McFerrin just wrote a really good paper about what's going on in Europe. Justin Haskins and I've got a new paper coming out about the Trump tax cut. So a lot of good stuff happening.
And Sam?
Same thing. Go to the heartland.org and also go to my Substack at stkarnick.substack.com.
Alrighty, thank you guys so much. Remember to watch us again right here tomorrow for the Climate Realism Show. All right, thank you everybody. We will see you again next week. Bye.